Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Richard Gatewood, iCrossing's Head of Digital Solutions, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Our session today is focused on a challenge that nearly every marketing leader faces: content chaos and scalability, specifically the struggle to build and execute content across the end-to-end content lifecycle, including strategy, creation, deployment, and all of this with lean teams and rising expectations. To unpack this, we're joined with two experts today who bring both strategic depth and operational clarity. First, our guest, Lisa Gately, Principal Analyst at Forrester. Lisa helps B2B organizations build audience-centric content engines that drive measurable outcomes and impact. And alongside her, our own Sam Colebrook, Content Strategy Director at iCrossing. Sam leads global content transformation for leading brands and is pioneering the use of AI tools to improve content intelligence and audience research. So with that, let's dive in. Maybe the first question I'll pitch to you, Lisa. Lisa, when organizations are looking to scale content with generative AI and agents, where do you see the biggest gaps in role clarity, and how should teams be structured to close them?
Well, it's an interesting one. This past year, I studied a leading cohort of generative AI adopters for content. This was out of a group of respondents for a survey in marketing. And what I found, about a fifth of them would consider leading adopters because they have generative AI in production. I take things we can learn from them. And that is, they really have a handle on role clarity and operational excellence. And so you get into a lot of things if you were looking at operations like having master content calendars, their use of technology, being data-driven. But underneath that, I think role clarity is this important multiplier. A lot of leaders are thinking about you adopt generative AI and you're going to be able to dig into this backlog and take care of a lot of things with content. But really, if you're not clear on who is doing what at different stages of the content lifecycle, you are setting yourself up for the chaos, as we say. I really look for these teams. As far as you'd asked about clarity, I would take a look at this. Who is providing some inputs, the strategy, the messaging? Who is providing the throughputs as you start getting into the creation and production? And then as you are looking at outputs, how you build that feedback loop, anything to do with distribution and measurement, anything that informs you with future decisions. Be really clear and make sure those team members know how that's handled, especially with a lot of complex organizations today.
I love that. Sam, I know we've worked with a lot of different types of clients, and some of our clients do have these kind of fragmented or siloed teams. What types of governance frameworks do you think help align, especially around editorial oversight and brand standards when it comes to this subject?
Yeah, so we've been thinking a lot about enterprise role clarity and governance, especially through our work recently rolling out intelligent content, which is our AI-driven content supply chain tool at iCrossing. And what we're finding through setting up that tool is that it's not just a simple case of replacing processes with technology. And to make a supply chain successful, we've really got to embed AI agents directly into the existing workflows. You can't just rely on teams prompting and using AI chat interfaces and hoping for the best. So on a recent project, we've been helping one of our enterprise automotive brands scale their content planning and production globally using intelligent content. And through that, we quickly realized that to really embed an agentic system, we have to go beyond the tool itself, which means, as Lisa kind of alluded to, it means looking at each stage of the supply chain of that process, so research, briefing, deployment, writing, and so on, and really spotting the areas of high volume and low value work that agents can pick up quite comfortably, but also defining who in the business owns each stage and what their current processes and workflows look like. And this was a particular challenge, I think, for this business because they are super complex. They've got a central US team, but they have large regional teams across EMEA and LATAM, Latin America. And without governance, there's a real high risk for them for silos and duplication, and ultimately doing the wrong thing but faster. And I think through intelligent content, through our work of what we're learning with intelligent content and rolling out AI agents is that the very act of building an agentic workflow for enterprises forces the organization to define these things. You can't just plug agents into a vague and chaotic system. You really have to agree on the rules and the guardrails. So, what are our standards? Who owns the final editorial oversight? Where do the checkpoints live? And humans can usually work around a little ambiguity, and we've been doing that for some time. But agents can't read between the lines in the same way that we can. So we really have to make the lines clear. So clearly defining roles and standards might have been a nice to have previously, but it really is the foundation for working with AI without breaking brand integrity.
I love this idea of a forcing function to keep us from doing the wrong things faster. Lisa, what are you telling clients around the new processes or checkpoints that they ought to put in to be able to prevent that?
Yeah, I mean, some people have that idea, like you said, Sam, of it was possible to get by before, or if it's just governance, it's red tape. Well, now it's really this guardrail that's going to help you achieve the things you thought you were setting out to do. And it's really important for your brand that AI will expose things that much faster too. As much as you think that you're going to have all these benefits of upside of AI, it doesn't erase the need for role clarity. And so it's going to magnify things without clear ownership.
Well, Lisa, maybe you can keep the mic and go from roles and responsibilities to new content models. I know a lot of the people on the call here and a lot of the clients that we're talking to are really thinking about how to operationalize their teams and thinking about in-house versus outsourced approaches to execution. What's your advice along new content models in this new world that kind of helps to tame the content chaos?
Yeah, well, I'll take some cues from data. Also in our State of B2B content survey, we were looking at where do people have pain points? Where are they seeing the most friction? Even though there's AI adoption on the rise, they consistently said that leading challenge is inefficient content creation and reviews and approvals. And you'd say, well, who hasn't lived through that? But now that we're looking at some changing some of this, it's a signal about you need to relook at your operating model. And I say this because as you add more capabilities, and of course, as you are adding, there are certain points for humans to decide. If you're already having issues with that decision rights, that's your signal. So number one. And I know another point is I hear from a lot of marketers who think, well, now I could bring a lot of things in-house. AI will do it all for us. And I think it's time to get really strategic. I see people, fortunately, they are being very thoughtful about there are some really great capabilities. Now you're looking at the right partnership with anybody externally about where are you really getting this opportunity. You have somebody very strategic and helping you with creative, the concepts, your strategy. You have some capabilities that maybe you didn't. And as your business is changing, they're going to help you in moving forward. Technology and a lot of your distribution, there are so many angles where you could be complementing your team. So it's not this binary, we're moving from one to the other and we're done. I think people are being really considerate, or they're considering their model. As much as we talked about role clarity, were there things that you just don't want to bolt on the technology and do differently? And by the same token, don't just keep working with the same type of partners. You're going to value certain capabilities and see where that adds the most effectiveness for you.
Well, maybe we'll stay on the same topic, but maybe take this in a different direction with you, Sam. I know these content teams are evolving fast when you're on the ground. What are the new skills that marketers need to develop to stay ahead, especially as AI takes on more of the like day-to-day content creation tasks that go underneath of that?
Mm-hmm. So this makes me think of one of our clients in the hospitality sector that recently found themselves in quite a common position where they were under pressure as they saw direct competitors dramatically ramping up their content programs. So they needed to scale fast, and it would be great again if there was an AI switch that they could flip and just switch back. But they using intelligent content, they had to rethink their entire operating model from the ground up. So projects like research, writing, first draft content, campaign concepts, all things that they would have previously outsourced to agencies, they can now just really easily do in-house, just because execution's become so much simpler and quicker. And because the systems that within intelligent content, within AI, AI tools force clear governance and workflows, which we've talked about, they're able to onboard an AI workforce in weeks instead of months. But that speed only works if there is, as you say, Richard, a shift in the skill sets, in the team skill sets. So what we see is that instead of siloed specialists that would have traditionally worked in isolation, so strategists owning research, or the editor owning quality control of content, social media manager owning promotion, they're really having to build out T-shaped roles that have now full oversight across the entire content lifecycle. So, these new directors need to know what good looks like at each stage of the process, so that they can then streamline it end to end and remove the need for multiple checkpoints, multiple handoffs, and all things that would have inflated the timeline, and also, I think, quite damaging and quite important was it would really remove momentum as well from delivery as well, which is really important, I think, for a successful content program. So that's important. I think also another critical shift that we've seen around skills and operation models is a redefinition of what skills matter most in the light of LLMs. And intelligent content in LLMs, I think in general, are just really good at providing options and generating options, but it really does still just fall to humans to decide what is good, what is a priority, what is aligned with brand standards, and how to keep the output aligned with brand standards. And because, as I've said, execution has become so commoditized now because of generative AI, it means that anyone can be a creator. So increasing volume isn't, that's not where the value is anymore. It's now the crucial differentiator for teams and skill sets is judgment, really human judgment and insight. And I think that's really where we're seeing teams having to evolve their operating models.
Okay, so just a quick follow on that then. Now, everybody's a creator thanks to AI. Do you have any tips for these teams out there on how to make sure that they are making content that's smarter and insight driven?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to it's still having those checkpoints there. I think we still need checkpoints, and we still need to be making sure if we are using AI systems, if we are using AI agents, that they need to be hydrated with good quality data and inputs. And also, I think if we are using those models as well, not just relying on dev teams, developers in the setup and maintenance of those systems as well as having these kind of T-shaped directors overseeing the content lifecycle. It's really important for them to be involved in the shaping of prompts, and also the evaluating of the prompts as well, because their skill sets and their subject matter expertise are crucial in optimizing the output of the agents, and saying if the output is inaccurate or if it's not of the high standards that they're expecting. So I think they need to be embedded into the actual design of the system as well. I think is really important to make sure that they're creating insight driven content that's managed at a high standard.
I love that. We've got these new roles and responsibilities and governance. We've got these new operating models and teams. So maybe Lisa, back to you. This is an age-old question. Marketing leaders today are under increasing pressure to kind of show that value that comes out of it. So what are the biggest measurement pain points that you're seeing, and how should organizations rethink the way that they show the value of content and really improve their taxonomy or their performance tracking or any of these other things that go into helping to show how these things are bringing real impact to the business?
Marketers sure are feeling this pressure. And I know this because it comes up in almost every conversation. It also came through in our data loud and clear when we asked about the #1 priority for content is improving measurement capabilities. We were talking earlier about teams who are fragmented or siloed. So initially conversations talk about what you are able to measure. I think of that meaning across these systems that Sam was describing for us, it's really making sure that things are connecting to each other if you're able to see the full journey. But I also think of another big topic that comes up with marketers today, and that is broader marketing reliance on some outdated or falsely confident metrics where we know if you were focused on clicks, traffics, some of the things that for all time we have been thinking about, that's not going to take us into the future where everybody is talking about AI-powered search or what our audiences are doing. So everyone is adjusting to these shifting buyer behaviors or what our audience is doing to really be in so many different places. So for measurement, you are thinking about some of these capabilities as, yes, AI visibility is this new frontier. Everyone is looking at that. So you have to ask yourself beyond the playbook we've been using the past few years, are you being cited in AI summaries? Do you know where your share of answer? Do you know, where and what gets you cited? Some of this is really, it is new for some marketing teams as a whole. For the content team, it's really going back into that of how does that measurement help you really bring through the content intelligence you're talking about? It informs your decision. Are we quick to bring on the things that are meaningful for an audience? I know the measurement is part of the challenge. It's also for some content teams, it's also working back across the organization because there's pressure in what the company wants to say versus what you're finding and learning. So having that immediacy of the feedback from your audience will matter.
Well, Sam, I know we're feeling a little bit of the squeeze from those big creative budgets as they kind of come down nowadays. How are you helping clients shift toward content strategies that are informed by data and measurement so they can make sure that every dollar is as effective as it can possibly be?
Yeah, I mean, as I'll build on what Lisa was saying, there is the sad truth that many leaders are, still obsessing over those metrics that we've for a long time probably been too comfortable in, like page views, bounce rates, and things that are quickly becoming, at risk of becoming obsolete. I think, because I think with a lot of these things, AI has just been a catalyst, which is accelerating the need for us to really think about these things more quickly. That we at iCrossing are starting to try and reframe the conversation around measurement, less about traffic and likes and more around engagement quality. So looking more at scroll depth, dwell time, content saves, even things like attention metrics and assisted conversions. And I think even now with AI-driven search and zero-click journeys, having real conversations around whether or not a site visit is the be-all and end-all. If that's really what we should be focusing on, if that's what we should be tying success to. And as we're seeing search behaviors shifting, we're also seeing a lot of our clients interested in LLMs as a new space that their brands can show up in. Naturally, they want to understand how these models function in their customer journeys, how their brand compares to competitors in this new environment as well, and crucially, what they can do to change. So as Lisa alluded to, LLM visibility, we've now set up almost all of our clients on our LLM brand monitoring tool to help measure how the main large language models talk about brands. So, we conduct traditional keyword research methods. We tie that in with primary user research, social listening, but I think importantly, sentiment analysis as well, because as well as being visible in these LLMs, we also really need to understand the affinity that they're showing and exactly how they're presenting brands versus their competitors as well. So that's been a really interesting exercise and measurement tool that we're kind of rolling out and using across our clients now. And it's new for us, it's new for everyone. It's relatively, I think, still a small slice of the mix today, but it's crucial that we start building that muscle now because we're seeing a huge shift in how people discover and trust brands. And that shift is likely to reshape entire marketing budgets in the years ahead.
Well, Lisa, it's a strange new world where we worry about what the machines think of us. And I can imagine that as you're talking to leaders about subjects like that, there's a lot of things that they need to talk to other stakeholders about to get them onto these new metrics that are necessary to be successful. Do you have any tips or tricks that you can provide to the people who are attending today to help re-educate stakeholders and reset their expectations around these new things?
Yeah, I think some of this, of course, data is your friend, but it's also talking and framing about what are your audiences doing? As much as you have some past historical data, but also a new picture of where your audiences are going. That research, particularly from your content team and understanding your personas in the buying group, that is super helpful. Also talking about how decisions are made and where your buyers are going. So a lot of that is, as Sam mentioned, using some of the metrics that now out of some capabilities, if you've got newer tools, explain how that works. A lot of leadership teams and boards are catching up on this, but I think that it's a very worthy conversation about how your buyers are changing, even your customers, and where you can get some feedback or real life examples. Show that. Also show where you're taking these efforts and all the things we're talking about, from the role clarity to you're sharpening up your capabilities for measurement.
Well, Lisa, maybe you can keep the mic, but I can imagine that with this new measurement or thinking about content in a different way, I bet we're generating a lot of content waste today and things that we were doing before. How should marketers think about getting their house in order around content waste or how to approach that problem?
Yeah, we are definitely in I'd say the strong approach now with everybody thinking that AI is going to help them do more faster. That, of course, leads to this question. Is it really content waste? Is it a visibility problem? I'd say content waste, based on our data, it's held steady over the past few years. A number of respondents who tell us their content isn't consumed the way they intended. That's in the 65% range. It really comes up as, is it waste? When you get underneath it, you might have people in other parts of the organization duplicating efforts or
Mm.
have people who don't know what existed. So in that content lifecycle, it's also working on what do you do with content when you've got, whether it's components, whole assets, what are you doing with your content so that other people check first? They know to look and reuse, and really having a point of view. It's not just glory for creating, but it's also really being insistent on we can be smart at reusing and curating and doing things that are meaningful for the audience. We're not wasting that effort. Some of it's also the inventory effort. You brought up very much a fact of the classics still remain of having a handle on what you have. So getting your house in order. Always, there's an effort for a lot of teams in terms of, are you updating? Have you checked your taxonomy as much as your business has changed across different parts of the business, that you have a universal taxonomy and the tagging practices? We know that's not glamorous, but we realize everybody's a creator. Everybody is probably tagging. So if you're giving people some guidelines, if you can give them some instruction on getting them into a sweet spot, at least have a few areas where everybody has had some training or communication about what to do for tagging. That also helps you in the longer term.
Great tips and tricks there, Lisa. So Sam, how is AI starting to affect content strategies to reduce content waste and to address this content waste problem?
Yeah, so I think, again, building on Lisa's point, so to really activate AI successfully, you do have to get your house in order. And I think a content inventory is a really deceptively simple, I think, resource to develop, and one that you really have to start with. So typically for us, that means using it as a catalog to really define those labels and tags. Not just to reduce duplication, but as well, it's a really strategic tool to then identify strengths, gaps, and opportunities, and increasingly more important, identifying those topic clusters, which are becoming even more important in this new world of AI. So because large language models break content down into smaller chunks, when generating their responses. It's really important now for content to be optimized for those clusters and to be grouped in that way, in a strategic way. Otherwise, it will just feel disconnected and will dilute, your message ultimately. So I think that's one of the key things that that we're really focusing on. We have been focusing on it for a long time, but as I say, with a lot of these things, it's being accelerated and just how important it is now. And I would say in terms of like content waste, having built inventories now for almost all of our clients across many years, I'd say that the biggest cause of waste often comes from format first strategies. So teams that create content like a checklist, we need to create more articles, we need to create more infographics or LinkedIn posts or TikToks or videos or whatever format, all for the sake of just filling up the content calendar. That creates a lot of waste. And so again, through intelligent content, we've consciously flipped that model so that instead of starting with formats, we start with subject-oriented, long-form, like kernel pieces of content that are persuasive, grounded in research, and crucially relevant to the audience as well. And once we've got that single core piece of content, we can then pass that on to the final agent in the chain, which then is able to adapt it for the right format, so that every asset ladders back to that core message. So it's by design, intent first, format second. So yeah, and I think we've seen really good success with one of our government clients. So we've used that approach to deliver very specific messaging at scale across different audiences and channels, all while staying consistent with that core idea and not duplicating efforts. And because so much of that, so many of the variants stem from that one idea, we have to really invest in making sure that idea is strong and impactful. So one of the ways that we do that is through another of our tools, Digital Twin, which is effectively a synthetic focus group, which represents our client's audience. So that helps us just validate each piece of content that we put out so that we can ensure that it's aligned to that audience. I think that's the main thing, as Lisa said, to make sure that it's not wasteful and that it's going to deliver on its purpose, is that it is tied to an audience and not just made for other, non-business reasons.
I think that's a great takeaway, Sam, is kind of like a thing that everybody should remember as they come away from this. Lisa, if you had one thing on content waste for people to take away, one lever that they should pull today, what is it that you would leave everybody with?
I would be relentless about your audience. I love the point Sam made about topic clusters. I would say layering on that, understanding your actual buyer questions. What are your audience's needs? That way you are really specific about it and you're checking for the gaps and you're building something really comprehensive around those topics that you want to be known for.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate both of your time today. We're going to have a few questions, but before we get into the questions, I just wanted to kind of top line some of the key takeaways that you shared with us today so that those on the call can kind of recap some of this. The first thing that we talked about were roles and responsibilities and how teams are fragmented, they need upskilling, and they need to be wary of doing the wrong thing faster. Then we talked about target operating models and some of the ideas around how to organize our teams to be able to make that work and come to life and what some of that upskilling looks like. Then we talked a little bit about measurement and making sure that we understood the value of the content that we were creating and how to make sure that we were making impact on the business and that we weren't missing those important insights. And then finally, we talked about content waste and making sure that relevance and organization is more important than ever, and no tool is going to make that go away. But the new tools are ready to assist and accelerate some of that waste prevention that's there. So with that, maybe we could go to a couple of questions today from the audience that's joined. So Sam, maybe the first question for you. What's a pain point your team's dealing with around measurement or AI that hasn't come up yet?
I would say a pain point that we're seeing a lot actually in the implementation of intelligent content and an agent specifically is around knowledge readiness. So I think we talk a lot about data readiness, but also developing a knowledge base, a successful knowledge base for an agent. So making sure that it has good access to good high quality documentation around things like brand, guidelines, tone of voice, all the things that content teams have been using to help give them steer and direction around their content. What we're finding is that those documents, again, back to my earlier point around humans being able to read in between the lines, quite often it's not a simple case of just taking a brand guideline document or a tone of voice document and just uploading it into an agent's knowledge base. There needs to be some translation process that makes that documentation really clear for the AI agent to be able to understand. So I think we're finding that there is that step in the process that needs to be considered now, that we actually develop this documentation a little bit more and refine it for use by agents. That's something that, knowledge readiness is something that we're having to focus on quite a bit.
I love that, Sam. Lisa, do you have anything to add or another point on that one?
I would say that another fact about measurement is really think of taxonomy isn't just this administrative work. It really is your backbone. That kind of gives you some keys to the kingdom if you're looking at all of the different systems that your content passes through. It's going to help you if you're really going to be effective, depending on degree of, are you trying to use taxonomy in different systems to go activate things and use the automation available, whether you are improving findability. So take the taxonomy and the tagging work very seriously. It's going to help you with your measurement.
I love that. So maybe the last question for each of you would be, somebody asked if you have any predictions about the future around content chaos and scalability and where content is going. So Sam, maybe you first. Like, do you have any predictions about where we're going to be a year, 5 years from now, and sometime in the future?
Sure. I mean, I might be biased, but I would say that my prediction is that content strategy is just going to be even more important in 5 years than it is now. I think, Lisa, you made a really good point earlier that, a lot of content strategy has been kind of a nice to have up until this point. And as AI and AI systems are becoming more and more part of content processes, the need for content strategy is just going to be more and more mission critical. I think because of the nature of AI systems needing clear definition and structure, these are exactly the things that content strategists and the skills that content strategists have been bringing, have been delivering for years. So I think content strategists are going to have more influence, I think, over the marketing budgets in the future, and the skill set is just going to have to broaden. We talked about T-shaped roles as well. The content strategy skill set is going to have to broaden as well quite a lot.
Well, maybe the same question to you, Lisa. Great answer, Sam.
Yeah, I love that one. So I'll go on further. I do think we'll continue. Everyone already is a creator. It will be more pronounced. So when you do have these teams where, let's say, roles like content strategist, someone who is full-time responsibility for content, you are really setting up, call it the blueprint, calling it the system that content goes through in your company. You may think you already do today, but it's going to be even more critical. For all of these reasons Sam and I were talking about, those roles are really going to set up more clarity for everybody who is a creator. I think in future, if we were looking at data, we would see far more people across the organization who say they're a creator. That could have different meanings in terms of customizing, reusing, repurposing content. But that importance of, have you set up the system to the company's best advantage? Your specialists are going to help you with a lot of that. So the classics of content roles, content operations, all the titles, people are speculating about the title, but I think some of those classics will live on. It's going to be very important.
Honestly, for me, I couldn't agree more. It may even go further on where content creators are really thought about educators for these LLM models, where LLM models are trying to find a single answer to a set of questions or a question. We may start thinking about ourselves of, how are we training? How are we providing information that they could do? So I think the future is a really interesting place. We've got to worry about how the machines think about us, and we've got to train them, and we've got to make all of our things relevant for their consumption. So Thank you all so much today for joining. If you're thinking about how to apply these content strategies to your own organizations, of course, I'm sure Lisa would love to talk to you about that from a Forrester perspective. We at iCrossing would love to talk to you about that on how to operationalize it. You can learn more about this topic on iCrossing.com or reach out to us or Lisa in the email shown here. Until then, thank you again, Lisa and Sam, and to everyone that joined today. This has been a pleasure.